Shri Vijay Sharma ji, the Chief Information Commissioner, Dr. P.K. Misra, ladies and gentlemen, let me at the very outset compliment the Central Information Commission and the State Information Commissions on a decade of their functioning after the new Act had come into existence. Though 10 years in the creation and building of a new institution is not a very long time, it takes time for such institutions to mature, but this indeed has been a very successful experience as far as the Indian society is concerned. It has transformed over the last few decades, and particularly in the last decade, us from a society which at one stage relished itself in secrecy. When we inherited our own government after independence, we inherited a system where we all believed, from those who had ruled us earlier, on the basic premise that the king could do no wrong. And since the sovereign was always presumed to be right, various challenges and problems in governance could have entered. There were discretions, there could be even abuse of power, there could be cases of nepotism, favoritism, and in the absence of information tricking on the society, this could go unchecked. And therefore, India had to transform into a society with far higher standards of civilized governance. I think in the first phase, we transformed into a stage where the requirements of governance were redefined. Every action of the government had to be informed by reason. Those reasons had to be recorded. Those reasons had to be relevant. Those reasons could never be arbitrary. And we passed the test of first stage of civilized governance, in which the governments had to act rationally and reasonably. Our second phase was where every action was subject to review by some other institution, in most cases the judicial institution itself. And then started a campaign as to why we must not have an open society. The word right to information till that time was not very frequently heard of. It gained popularity out of a collateral coincidence where in the Supreme Court, in the first judge's case, the correspondence between the Chief Justice of a High Court and the Chief Justice of India was asked to be made public, at least before the court. So far, we had heard of the right of free speech. Was free speech only confined to my expressing myself? Or in order to express myself, I must also have adequate sources of knowledge and information. And therefore, free speech was expanded as not merely the right to speak out, but also the right to be informed. And from that right to be informed was born of the whole idea that this actually stems out of one of our constitutional guarantees. And then, of course, there was a debate in the media, a political debate. Civil society had a great role in this. But then there were apprehensions because we were still transforming into an open society. Would so much openness be bad for governance? Would it multiply the amount of work in governance? when everything is to be made public, would civil servants in particular be cautious about expressing themselves in writing? Or will they be wishy-washy in the giving of their opinion as far as the superior authority is concerned? But we are all glad today that this debate finally culminated in the enactment of what is an exemplary law. And this exemplary law has brought its dividends and benefits to the society. I can tell you, as somebody who has been a part of the governance system of India, every time a decision is now to be taken, one of the constraints in the mind of the decision maker is that there is a possibility that this decision would eventually become public. There is a further possibility that this decision would then be questioned, and therefore the decision itself must speak out of its own fairness. And that is where what the Chief Information Commissioner just now referred to as a great tool of good governance, openness and transparency has added to it. Not merely that there must be reasons in writing, there must be a correct and an appropriate decision. The constraint itself that this becomes public and is liable for further scrutiny is now an adequate pressure on every decision maker that he must act fairly, and that fairness must be apparent on the face of the record itself. It now extends a little further. For persons in authority, it also impinges on probity of conduct, and therefore how they conduct themselves both in their public and private affairs are issues which can come into the public domain by using the great instrumentality, and therefore a constraint of prudent conduct which is up to norms of probity itself emerges out. And I think having completed a successful duration, one has now to look forward. The challenges of technology were just now mentioned. And of course, nobody can defy technology, nobody can bypass technology. And therefore, the introduction of technology itself can make the exercise of this right more effective. It can make it less time consuming, it can make it more cost effective. But our experience of the past few years also teaches us the virtues of restraint and caution in this. Where do we then draw the line between public conduct and privacy of an individual? Those who administer this act will have to exercise that discretion itself adequately. Where is it that information is being used for empowerment, to avoid harassment, for the benefit of the small man? Or is it merely being used by some busybodies for collateral purposes? I think this is a never-ending debate which will have to carry on. And therefore, for those who administer this act, I think the challenges of doing the balancing act between strengthening the exercise of this right and preventing a possible abuse in the implementation of this particular legislation, and whatever are the evolutions which take place either by virtue of case law being developed by the institution or by superior courts, or further improvements by a legislative intervention, I think our wisdom will certainly prevail, and this act, which has been of a great utility to the society itself, will certainly continue to mature and continue to grow. I'm sure the coming years will add to this experience, and the institution of the Information Commission in the states and the center itself will gain further maturity and be of great useful service to the society and to the small man in this country. I wish the CIC and all the state commissions a great success for the 2 days of deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insightful views on the complex relationship between right to privacy and right to information.